It's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Carolyn Harris. We'll be discussing her fantastic book, The Garden Crew Meet Stanley, available for purchase through Amazon and also through ebook format through the Kindle and the Google Play Store. And I will say, Carolyn was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best movers in the business. Author Reputation Press Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, do yourself a favor and contact ARP. You can find out more information on them at authorreputationpress.com. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Carolyn, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you so much for being a guest. How are you?
Well, thank you. I'm so excited. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Carolyn, we're very excited to have you here. The honor is all ours, and we know that we're going to be able to receive such a fantastic education, and really what a wonderful gift for families across the board. Now, I know we have so much information to cover, so let's jump right in, but hold off slightly before going into the narrative. Carolyn, start by talking to our listening audience and really telling us a little bit more about yourself, please.
Well, from my adult life, I was a teacher, and I guess teaching English to reluctant readers, I'll put it that way. And I always found, that if they loved the story, I mean, you could almost get them to do, get them to do all their work, and I'd make promises that, if they get all their work done, we'd have the last 20 minutes to read our story, and I'd read to them out loud. So always books a big part of my life, and anyway, when I started writing these stories, I didn't realize what was going to happen. My grandson had asked me to write down this little story that he made up about vegetables with superpowers. But when I started to write it down, I took away their superpowers and made them just like regular little vegetables with but of course they could. It's a fantasy. They could read, or they could speak and do all these things. But no, they didn't have actual superpowers like they couldn't fly and things like that. But anyway, in the first book, they meet up with this giant bulldozer that wants to bulldoze the ground, and they have to work together to save their beloved farm, and they have to show all this courage that they didn't think they had. In the second book, they go to the farmer's market, and one of the little characters gets very sick, and they have to again show all this courage to be able to climb up to the rafters and look around, or roll around on the bottom of the farmer's market with everybody's big boots on, and they're afraid they were going to get squished and that sort of thing. Anyway, so they showed their amazing courage, even, because they loved their friend so much. But in the third book, and I didn't even know where this came from, except for the fact that I live on the water. I live on the harbor in St. John in New Brunswick. And we're known for the high tides in St. John, in New Brunswick, the Bay of Fundy. And one of our main rivers here in New Brunswick is the St. John River, and it flows down too and empties into the Bay of Fundy. So I get to see the harbor seals out here, and I remember it seemed like one little guy. He kept popping his head up, and I kept thinking he's just staring at me. And anyway, I started calling him Stanley because that was my dad's name. And anyway, he frolic around, and anyway, I kind of got attached to him, and I wondered how I could incorporate him with the Garden Crew, because they live like in a sort of a farming community. And then I thought, well, gosh, they he can swim right up the river. And of course, once he gets up the river, and the garden crew see him, and they've never seen a seal, so they think it's a hippo or a cow, and they're all quite shocked and surprised. And then Stanley talks to them and says, "No, I'm a mammal." And anyway, and he takes one of them for a little ride on his nose, and they have a blast. But then all of a sudden he pops up and he's got this plastic around his neck. So they have to save him. And again, they show all their courage. And I won't tell you the ending, but they manage to do everything they can to try to save him and get the plastic off his neck.
Going a little bit more in depth, because we know about the books now. We know a little bit more about your background.
Yes.
Articulate to our listening audience what inspired you to not only embark upon this creative journey, but really not only embark upon this creative journey and write this book, but really embark upon a creative journey and become a writer.
Well, I still can barely consider that I am, to tell you the truth. And I'm always shocked. I go a lot to the farmers markets locally, not so much lately because of COVID, but I get a great response because I have a lot of the little stuffed toys that go with the characters in the book. Mm-hmm. And the children just gravitate toward the little stuffed toys. And then one time I've gone to different schools and I have done readings as well. And everybody just seems to love these little characters. But it originally started with my grandson when he was 8, and he told me this story and about some of these talking vegetables. And he said when he left my house that day, he said, "Write it down, Nana." So I started to write it down, and this is kind of the funny part. Once I got going and kind of thought, well, maybe I could do this, maybe I could. I took a couple of creative writing classes, and the advice that was given to me by one of the teachers, I had about 60 typewritten pages, if you can imagine, for a children's book. And she said, "Carolyn, cut the book in half." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'll have to get rid of some of my little characters." And then she said, and I waited and looked at her, and she said, "And then cut it in half again." And it was it broke my heart. But I realized that all these little characters, I had way too many. So I think that's why it prompted me to write the books, because once the little characters in book 1, their personalities are developed. Like, for example, in book 1, Walter Mellon is so sad and crying because he doesn't look scary and he wants to scare off the bulldozer. And he cries to his friend, and "I just don't look rough and tough, I look like a big old watermelon." And she says, "Well, you could be a sumo wrestler." And so she grabs a little tea towel from the clothesline and wraps it around him, and he doesn't have any hair, and he cries about that. And then she said, "Well, we'll put this tomato soup can on top of your head, and it'll look like one of the little ponytails, the sumo wrestlers." Mm-hmm. And I had the illustrator have a little bubble up above Molly's head. She's a little female watermelon, and she had an idea of what a sumo wrestler should look like. So I wanted the children to know what Walter was trying to look like. So anyway, so he goes into battle, with this the feeling of the strength of a sumo wrestler. And anyway, it's it was kind of cute. But anyway, but once their little characters were developed, then with the second book it was easier. And then the third book, all the little characters are there. And so it's been like, I know it's too well used, but it is a labor of love because I love these little characters. Now, I have another book in the works right now about a little pig that's not in good shape, and he's on his way to the factory. And anyway, all the garden crew, they just fall in love with him, and they want to keep him and keep her in the garden. And anyway, she escapes, and they try to hide her. But anyway, it's I have so much fun doing this, as you can probably tell.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, we can hear from the passion in your voice. This is clearly something that you
Oh,
love doing, which just makes it
well,
even
I do love it. Yeah.
absolutely.
And I think one of my biggest messages I try with these little characters is that in every situation they are frightened. There's situations that are scary to them, and they encourage each other and they help each other and they stand up for each other, and they put themselves, maybe not in, I don't mean life and death situations, but in situations that test them, because as a teacher, I saw kids that were being bullied, and other children would stand back, and they're the ones I would be a little bit more annoyed with, because the ones that were their so-called friends of the child being bullied, they didn't have the courage to stand up and say, "Don't talk to my friend like that," or if they'd all got around their friend that was being bullied, or if they all supported each other in some way. So we all are. I feel in life we're tested all the time, and if children could learn to be, just strong and brave and proud of yourself, despite even being a watermelon, Anyway,
I absolutely love that.
you know,
Carolyn, one thing that I'm really curious about, because again, we know that there are so many children books that are out there, and emphasizing the importance of friendship is something that is a commonly and well-known topic and theme that gets discussed.
Yes, I'm sure it is it's in a million books.
Now, one thing that is so unique is this emphasis of highlighting the importance of plastic in the ocean. Now, you were talking about how you live right near the water, so I'm sure that has some influence as well. Talk to our listening audience. What inspired you to incorporate that other aspect into the narrative?
Well, the funniest thing, even when years ago, before plastic became such a big issue in the water that we see today. I mean, there's so many videos of it that would just break your heart. Some of these sea animals that are all caught up in plastic. I'm very, very, very tender-hearted when it comes to animals to begin with. But I guess seeing this little Stanley out there, and of course it was my dad's name, and I don't know, then I just thought, and again, as a writer, you have to have, in any story, you almost have to build up some tension. So I knew that Stanley could go up there and have a blast with the Garden Crew and have fun, but something had to happen, to cause suspense. And in the story, there's at least 2 or 3 pages where they're all pushing and pulling, and Stanley's getting, he's starting to cry, and he's frightened, and the plastic's pulling, and he's in a lot of distress. And Patty, the little potato, she's the sweetest little thing. She says she can hold her breath and she can swim underneath and untie the plastic. And of course she dives down, and she's just this little plain brown potato, but she's adorable. And she dives down and unties the plastic, but they're all up above and they're counting down, like, can she hold her breath that long? And it's 1, 2, 3, and the countdown. Oh, and now they're all starting to be worried about Patty. And sure enough, of course, up she comes. And well, I don't want to tell the ending. But anyway, he does at the very end, he does give a little message to the children, and it's the only book that I've actually done that. On the very last page, it says Stanley has a message for us, and he says it can wrap around our flippers or around our little nose. It can wrap around our fins and gills. It can wrap around our toes. I should mention that the whole book is written as a poem as well. I just started doing that automatically without even, I didn't set out to do that, but it just seemed to come out as in a rhythm. Mm-hmm. So it's all rhymed and rhythm. And of course, the rewrites are enormous. The story was fun, but the rewrites are enormous because you have to get the right rhythm and the right rhyme and the right syllables and the right flow. So it's, oh, boy, there were lots of nights when I'd break out in a sweat because I couldn't get the rhythm right. Anyway, but but after the 100th edit, it came out pretty well. And so reading it is fun. And when I would read it to the school children, I could, they would hear they would almost could guess the last word. So I'd stop and they'd fill it all in, so cute. And anyway.
Absolutely.
But,
and what a great segue that you've established, because as we start to tie up this fantastic interview, Carolyn, I love having this platform. Being an artist myself, I love being able to utilize this platform to pay it forward to other artists out there listening in. Now, I know you, in a very humble way, said that you still don't consider yourself a writer. Now, listen, you've published multiple books. This is the third book in the series. You've already hinted towards another one on the horizon. So you're clearly an accomplished author. Now, I love what you said in terms of the revisions that you had to go into with your book, because I think so often we think about, I have this creative idea and I just put the words to the page and then all of a sudden, poof, I have a book. And it's published and it's out.
See, you're right. It's so much work. Well, for me, and I just want every little syllable, to be right on and not, no. I know you see pictures on TV or people writing a book and then they write that end and they think, oh, well, that's done. And I think, oh my goodness, that's not true at all.
But in reality,
not for me.
Exactly. In reality, it's not like that at all. So I'd love to take this opportunity. Any words of wisdom that you can offer a new writer out there that's listening in, that's just starting out?
Oh, words of wisdom. Oh, yes. I don't know about wisdom, but if you have an idea, don't. The worst thing for me as a retired teacher is that if your book doesn't get picked up by a publisher, then you're a failure. Like like they don't want you. They don't want you. They don't want your book. They don't see any value in it, and that can crush your soul. And I believe there are a lot of really good books sitting in the bottom of a drawer that the people have been rejected once or twice or 10 times. And you can turn to a self-publishing company if you have a few extra dollars and get this printed up, because I think your life is incomplete if you have this message and it's just bubbling inside of you. And I really think you should do it. And don't be discouraged, because believe me, I mean, it's a lot of work, and times have changed, and people do self-publish, and then they can still be successful, maybe even in your own little community, but it feels good.
Absolutely.
That's
great words of wisdom there, Carolyn. Guys, and this can apply to any aspect of life. Whenever there's something that we are aspiring to do, that comes with its own fair share of the fear of failing, right? And a lot of times, that's the reason why we shy away from really extending ourselves, because we don't want to feel that disappointment and that feeling of failure, right?
Exactly. My grandson said to me, Nana, his father bought him a guitar, and he said, I said, Luke, do you like it? Oh, I can't play. I said, well, honey, that takes years. You can't just pick up and play.
But Carolyn, what is amazing about what you're saying is because that's true.
Oh, they don't realize the hours that go behind something that you love. And,
right. And that's like, listen, like anything in life, it's kind of like that old adage of the iceberg, right? You only see a very small percentage of the iceberg above the water, but below it, that's where it all is. It's the same thing with any dream that you have. A lot of times when we see actors on the TV screen, or we see musicians on the stage performing, we see the final product. So we want to be the final product. We don't see the years of rejection, the years of sleepless nights, the years of dedication that goes into it. And writing is no different.
Well, it took me probably 6 years before the first book was, I felt ready. And I I have to say it is a bit easier now. But boy, oh boy, no. So anyway,
Listen,
yes,
and Carolyn,
but
that
definitely
is
people
exactly
should keep
why,
at it. Yeah.
of course, yeah. And that is exactly why when you are being modest and you say you don't consider yourself a writer, I'm here to counterbalance that and say, no, you absolutely are. You've had those sleepless nights.
Thank you.
You've had those endless hours, those endless days where you've invested so much
Yes.
time and energy. You are absolutely
Oh, I have.
the full embodiment
I
of a
have.
person of distinction and an accomplished author. And we absolutely loved having you as a guest today. Guys,
Oh, thank you so much. You're so good at your job, and you make people feel so good. And so, it's very, very much a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise.
Anyway, thank you.
Absolutely. No, of course. Guys, listen, there's so much more that can be said, but we're going to end it here because now the onus is on you and you know what you have to do. Amazon is where you have to go. It's available in ebook form through Kindle and also Google Play. Head on over there, pick up your copy of The Garden Crew Meet Stanley by Carolyn Harris. And remember, this is the third book in the series, so there's 2 other ones that are already out, and there's 1 on the way.
Yep.
So check back in frequently for all of the information. You surely will not be disappointed. A fantastic journey to take with your children, but an even better gift for you to get for someone else's. Carolyn, once again, thank you. Thank you for being a guest with us on People.
Thank you very, very much.